morning all. Now the subject. This is hard to Susan, because we usually do evening topics, Susan.
We certainly do.
Yeah. So anyway, what are we talking about this morning?
Well, we're talking about a subject that gets quite a lot of coverage, but is actually very, very important and is quite subtle to notice. So we're talking about how an abusive relationship can actually creep us up on us without us even noticing almost. You know, we suddenly think what's going on, or we may not even be aware of what's actually happening because we get so entrenched in being compliant and obedient and doing what we're told that we kind of lose sight of the fact that this is not right or not appropriate really for us to be living like that.
So somebody is going through an abusive relationship at the moment. What do you say to them?
Well, I think if they're going through an abusive relationship right now, I think at that point in time it's important to perhaps start documenting it. If you've actually realised you are in an abusive relationship, maybe make notes, dates, times, what actually happens, keep those notes in a secret place, maybe share with friends what's actually going on, get some support, try to perhaps put some money to one side so you feel a little bit more in control, you've got a few more options, maybe even investigate where there might be a refuge or somewhere that you can go. And don't forget, men can be abused just as, you know, we tend to think it's a province of men abusing women, but actually men can be victims of very difficult relationships too. But one thing I like to do with abuse is to actually back up and start investigating how this happened, because as I said at the outset, these things can creep up on us. You know, if we went on a first date with somebody and they were rude or offensive or were pushing us or making sarcastic, nasty comments or whatever, we would never see them a second or third time. And it is that subtle elevation of the bad treatment that often goes unnoticed, where before we know it, first of all, we might start thinking it's for our best. Somebody's trying to improve us. They care about us. They want to get us right. But over time, we might find we're getting alienated from our family, our friends, our work. And gradually we become more and more reliant on them, and they become more and more in control of us. So it can be a very slow burn.
On the men's side, it's about empowering them.
I think on both sides it's about empowerment, because men can feel ashamed, embarrassed, belittled, emasculated, because they are, they may perceive themselves as giving permission for this to happen, or what kind of person could I be, what kind of man can I be for this to actually happen, whether it's in a gay relationship or a heterosexual relationship or a work relationship. They can feel that there's something wrong with them, they're not a proper man, and that can be very tough. But I think equally women often can end up in situations where they're perhaps feeling trapped, financially trapped, or they've got children, they feel trapped, or where would I go, or the shame of admitting this to people. So I think both sides need empowering in perhaps slightly different ways, but it's about gaining confidence, it's about gaining self-belief, it's about regaining self-worth and thinking to yourself, feeling to yourself, I deserve better than this, more than this.
What do abusive relationships happen?
Sorry?
Yeah, sorry. Why do abusive relationships happen?
Well, I think we may be attracted to somebody who is charismatic, or perhaps appears to be superior in some way, or we feel drawn to them, or they may have fantastic personality with a life and soul. So we may feel, wow, that person, and they've chosen me, and how fortunate am I, and this is wonderful, and they perhaps might be wealthy, or they might have status, or they might be highly intelligent, or whatever it is. There's some charisma going on, and I think they happen because perhaps the other person starts feeling more and more in control, and perhaps they are insecure. Perhaps that person who is the abuser may well be insecure themselves, and they see the best way to keep that person close to them is almost to perhaps enslave them or make them feel beholden to them in some way. So if the victim, I'll call it victim, sort of gives permission by staying or accepting their apology when they come back the next day and say, I'm so sorry, it will never happen again, whatever it might be, then that dynamic starts becoming more and more established. And I think both sides can, the abuser often feels guilty, bad about themselves, whatever, but it depends what's involved. Sometimes there's alcohol involved, sometimes they, as I say, are insecure themselves, or perhaps they have had a damaged background themselves. So it can be that patterns of behaviour where we are the abuser or we are the receiver, the victim of this, that both sides may have expectations that almost match each other. It can be an almost a toxic relationship that both people feel drawn to.
Yeah. What causes relationship abuse?
What causes it? I think, well, there's lots of reasons. I think it can be that, say, perhaps one person, the abuser might say, okay, honey, you don't need to work anymore. I'll look after us. I'm earning enough for both of us, all of us. Don't bother. Take some time out. Think what's going on. Think what you want to do with your life. And as a consequence of that, the victim might become more beholden, might feel guilty that I ought to, I should, I must, because the other person is paying for everything, is supporting me financially, supporting me and my kids financially. Or it may be that we don't feel attractive or intelligent and the other person is deemed as being more superior in lots of different ways, so we look up to them. Or it may be that they criticise our family, our friends, and establish a sort of us against the world mentality where they say, oh, don't see your friends, they're a bad influence, or they don't like me, or I don't want to come along. Or every time we make plans to see our friends, they may say, I've got something really important that I need for you to support me with. Don't go out with them. And then gradually they start to alienate the person from their original friends and family. So there can be lots of reasons why these things actually happen and escalate. But it's often a sort of power trip type thing where the abuser is asserting more and more and more control. And if their victim is sort of almost compliant, believes everything they're told, feels that it's in their best interest to follow, then that, and actually to some extent it can be quite seductive to actually have somebody come along and say, hey honey, don't work, I'll pay for everything, I'll look after you, you don't have to think about anything, you don't have to worry about anything, I'll sort everything out. Initially that can be quite seductive, particularly if you had a difficult few years and somebody comes along and says, I'll look after you. That can be quite compelling. So sometimes we actually think, oh, what a relief, that person's going to look after me. But gradually over time we realise that we're subtly being presented with the bill, the payback for all of that support.
Yeah. I know some relationships and a lot of abuse. Sorry, there was a lot of abuse in them with alcohol and it was all sorts of stuff in that relationship.
Yeah.
When does a woman or a bloke have to say no, I've had enough?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's the first time anything happens, but it's about also being aware of, I specialise in abuse, and one of the things that I will say to my clients, if they are the victim of abuse, a survivor of abuse, I will say, what is it about you? One of the things we have to deal with in therapy is what is it about you that kind of gave permission for that to happen? That abuser is not abusing everybody they meet. So what is it about your situation that perpetuated that allowed that to continue? And so what needs to happen is that the victim, the survivor, has to find ways to say stop or no or I'm walking away. And if, take children out of the equation because that's a whole different situation. But if you have somebody who is adult, where did this originate? Why did this happen? What is it about you that person tuned into? What was it about them that you found so compelling? And I think owning it is the first point. But the first time somebody lashes out or is vicious verbally or physically or violent or starts controlling somebody financially or starts alienating them from their friends or their family, you have to stand up to it. And often you find that, if somebody's trying to stop you going out for a night out, for example, with your friends, and you insist on going, you often find that when you come back, they're saying, "Oh, hi, honey, did you have a nice time?" So it's not like you're coming back to vitriol and anger and resentment. It's often they're relieved that that person has come back home. So start as you mean to go on, and being clear about what you will and won't accept. And that's why sometimes it is a good idea to have a little bit of financial independence, to keep some foot in a door where you're earning some money, to keep some lines of communication open with friends and family, to have an awareness that if things are starting to go wrong, that you note it down so that you have a reminder, because it's often easy to forget what's actually happened, a reminder of what's actually happened and when and dates and times, and you've almost got your own evidence there that helps you to remember what it's actually really like, but also is there if you need some sort of witness testimony at a future point in time. So those sorts of things can be important to do.
Yeah. Trouble is, with women all know the relationship, and if they're abused or whatever, they do find it hard to leave that relationship because they're comfortable in that relationship. Is that right?
Well, it can be hard to leave because of lots of different reasons. Some people are attracted to drama, so they kind of like the fieriness of it all. They like the making up afterwards. The person who has done the abusing is often exceptionally contrite. There's maybe gifts involved, endless promises to never repeat that behaviour. And that roller coaster ride of a relationship can be quite compelling for some people. But also, I think that the backdrop to this can be, where do I go? What do I do? There may not, somebody may not have any financial options, or they may perceive that there's nothing they can do. I mean, I often say that it's better to live on the 7th floor of a multi-tower block than in a mansion with a swimming pool if you are in an abusive relationship, but not everybody sees it that way. And so I've had clients who say, "Can you hypnotise me? I'm a hypnotherapist. Can you hypnotise me so I don't mind my husband having affairs?" So that because they are living in a fabulous idyllic lifestyle perceptually, personal plated Mercedes every year, they've got holiday homes in 6 countries around the world, for example, all that kind of thing, and it's a lifestyle that they don't want to lose or leave, and would rather stay put but try to endure the humiliation and the different types of abuse that are going on. So it depends. I mean, I don't know about comfortable is the right word, but certainly I think it can feel almost like I've no way out of this. And I think another starting point is to start finding ways out, like getting a small-time, part-time job if you haven't got any work at the minute, or keeping contact with friends, even if you're just going for a quick coffee, making sure that you look after yourself so that you feel fit and you're taking care of yourself and you're looking after yourself, and making sure your appearance is good and that you're taking good hygiene and sleep and things like that, so that you are doing things that maintain your self-esteem and your sense of worth, and I think those things are important.
Yeah. What do you say to men who find it hard to ask for help because they're all macho, don't they?
Well, if I'm talking to men, they've come to see me anyway. But I think channels of communication are becoming easier. I think a lot more men now are finding it easier to find their voice, and that culture of going to the pub and, Jack says to Pete, "How you doing, mate?" And Pete says, "I'm fine," and that's the end of that conversation. I think men are talking more about things. I see increasingly groups of men out for runs or bike rides together, and there's some element of conversation going on. I appreciate not every man is confident enough to do that, and depending on where you're working and what the culture is, can be tough to do that. But I think finding an ally, finding somebody to talk to, maybe exploring online sites. There are plenty of those out there where you can get men's mental health support, victims of abuse support, all those sorts of channels where there are forums, and you discover that you're not on your own. And that can be reassuring too, because there can be that sense that, look at me, look at the type of person, what can I be that I can allow this to happen? And I think finding that you're not alone is incredibly reassuring. So there are avenues, tentative avenues, where you can possibly get to, chat to people, converse with people, share with people, and get some level of support.
Yeah. Susan, thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
Invite people will go for reviews. Do we kind of like learn how to deal with it? No. Now, people will say to me, Steve, what are you talking about? And I'll tell you this. If someone abuses you, whatever way, I would leave. Because one, they might do it again. And two, when you first get abused, you've got that star there forever. Okay. Some people will forgive and carry on with their relationships. That's your choice. Take care, guys.